The sun disappeared at noon, but it was not because of a cloud or an eclipse. The blue sky was covered by a thick layer of black slime that looked like tar. It spread from horizon to horizon in seconds. In New York City, the noise of the traffic stopped as drivers stepped out of their cars to look up. The air suddenly felt very cold. Inside Vought Tower, the lights flickered and died. Ashley Barrett stood in the main conference room and stared out the window. Her hands were shaking. She had seen many disasters before, but this felt different. It felt like the sky was heavy. Outside the window, the black substance pressed against the glass. It moved and swirled as if it was thinking. High above the city, Homelander floated in the air with his cape fluttering in the wind. He looked at the black sky with a look of pure anger. He did not like things he could not control. He thought this was an attack by a new villain, or maybe a trick by the government. He decided to end it quickly. His eyes glowed with intense red light. He fired 2 powerful beams of heat vision straight up into the darkness. Usually his lasers cut through airplanes and steel walls instantly. But today, the red beams hit the black ceiling and simply vanished. There was no explosion. There was no smoke. The darkness just absorbed the energy. Homelander stopped firing and blinked in confusion. He flew higher and punched the black layer. His fist sank into the goo, and it felt cold and sticky. He pulled his hand back and saw the black stuff trying to crawl up his arm. He shook it off in disgust. Then the sky tore open. A massive creature fell through the clouds. It looked like a dragon, but it was made of the same living darkness. It had huge wings and a terrifying red spiral symbol on its head. It opened its mouth and let out a scream that broke all the windows in Times Square. Glass rained down on the people below, and they finally started to scream. Homelander flew at the dragon at full speed. He broke the sound barrier and slammed into the beast's neck. He expected the creature to fall, but it did not move. The dragon turned its head slowly and looked at him. Its white eyes were empty and cruel. It swatted Homelander with one large wing. The impact sent the superhero crashing down toward the city. He smashed through the roof of Vought Tower and plummeted through 20 floors of concrete and steel. The building shook like there was an earthquake. The dragon landed on top of the tower and dug its sharp claws into the roof. It roared again, and the sound was heard all the way in New Jersey. On the streets, the black rain began to fall. Where the drops landed, they did not make puddles. They stood up and grew teeth. The police fired their guns, but the bullets went right through the shadow monsters. A police car was lifted into the air by a black tentacle and thrown into a storefront. People ran into the subway stations to hide, but the darkness followed them down the stairs. This was not a super-villain attack that would be over in an hour. This was an invasion. The King in Black had found a new world to conquer, and the heroes of this world were not ready. They were used to fighting for cameras and ratings. Now they had to fight for their lives against a god of darkness who did not care who was the most popular. The age of superheroes was over in a single afternoon. The age of the symbiotes had begun. Homelander pushed a large piece of concrete off his chest. It crashed to the floor and broke into dust. He stood up in the middle of the ruined office. His suit was covered in gray dust, but there was no blood on him yet. He was not hurt, but he was very confused. He had never been hit that hard in his life. He looked around the room. Wires hung from the ceiling, and sparks flew from broken lights. A few Vought employees were lying on the floor. They were not moving. Homelander did not check on them. He walked to the edge of the broken floor and looked out at the city. The sky was still black. The giant dragon was sitting on top of the building above him. He could hear its claws digging into the metal. He felt a strange feeling in his stomach. It was fear. He pushed it down instantly. He was Homelander. He could do whatever he wanted. He flew out of the hole in the building and hovered in the air. The wind was cold and smelled like old meat. He looked down at the streets. The city was in chaos. Cars were on fire. People were running everywhere. Small black monsters were chasing them. These monsters looked like dogs made of slime without eyes. They had big teeth and long tongues. Homelander saw a group of police officers shooting at one of the monsters. The bullets hit the black slime and just stuck there. The monster did not care. It jumped on a police officer and bit through his vest like it was paper. Homelander ground his teeth. This was his city. These were his fans. He flew down at super speed. He did not care about saving the policeman. He just wanted to kill the thing that dared to invade his planet. He landed on the street with a loud boom. The pavement cracked under his boots. The black monster turned toward him. It hissed. Homelander fired his laser eyes. The red beams hit the monster in the chest. The slime sizzled and boiled. The monster screamed. It was a terrible sound. Homelander smiled. He could kill them. He walked forward and kept the lasers on the creature until it melted into a puddle of black goo. He turned to the other police officers. They looked at him with wide eyes. They were terrified. Homelander expected them to clap or cheer, but they were looking behind him. Homelander turned around. The puddle of black goo was moving. It pulled itself back together. It grew new legs and new teeth. It stood up again. It was not dead. Homelander felt that cold feeling in his stomach again. Billy Butcher sat in the driver's seat of a black van. He was parked 3 blocks away from Vought Tower. He was watching the news on a tablet. The screen showed a reporter screaming while a black tentacle pulled a cameraman into a sewer. Butcher turned off the tablet. He looked out the windshield. Huey was in the passenger seat. He was shaking. Mother's Milk was in the back checking his guns. Frenchie was mixing chemicals in plastic bottles. Kimiko was looking out the window with a blank face. Butcher lit a cigarette. He took a long drag and blew the smoke at the windshield. He said that this was a bloody mess. Huey asked if Vought made these things. Butcher shook his head. He said Vought was evil, but they were also greedy. Destroying the whole world was bad for business. He said this was something else. He said it looked like an alien invasion. Frenchie said the chemical structure of the slime was changing every second. He said he had never seen anything like it. He said it was alive, but also like a virus. Mother's Milk asked what the plan was. Butcher laughed a short, dark laugh. He said the plan was to stay alive and watch the Supes get eaten. He started the van. He wanted to get closer. He wanted to see Homelander bleed. They drove slowly through the panic. People banged on the side of the van, begging for a ride. Butcher did not stop. He was focused on the mission. They turned a corner and saw Starlight. She was standing in the middle of an intersection. Her eyes were glowing bright yellow. She blasted a wave of light at a group of shadow creatures. The light hit them, and they shrank back. The shadows did not like the bright light. It burned them. Starlight yelled at the people to run. She looked tired. Her costume was torn. Butcher watched her. He saw that she was actually hurting them. He told Frenchie to write that down. Bright light hurts them. Fire might hurt them too. It was good to know. Inside the main meeting room at Vought Tower, the 7 were arguing. The room was dark because the power was out. Emergency red lights were spinning. Ashley Barrett was screaming into a phone, but the lines were dead. Queen Maeve was putting on her armor. She looked calm, but her hands were tight. A-Train was pacing back and forth. He was moving so fast he was a blur. He kept saying they needed to leave. He said they should run to the west coast. The Deep was sitting on the floor holding his head. He said he could hear voices in his head. He said the ocean was screaming. Black Noir stood in the corner, perfectly still. He was sharpening a knife. Homelander flew into the room through the balcony doors. The glass shattered. Everyone stopped moving. Homelander looked at them. His eyes were red. He told them to shut up. He said they were going to go out there and kill every single one of those black things. He said they were the 7, and they did not run. A-Train said his legs were tired, and he could not run fast enough to kill 1,000,000 monsters. Homelander walked up to A-Train. He grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground. He told A-Train he would fight, or he would die right here. A-Train nodded quickly. Homelander dropped him. He looked at Maeve. He asked her if she was ready. Maeve pulled out her sword. She said, "Let's get it over with." The Deep stood up. He said the voices were getting louder. He said the darkness was hungry. Homelander told him to stop crying and go fight. They all walked to the elevator, but it was broken. They had to take the stairs or fly. Homelander flew out the window. Maeve jumped after him. The others had to run down the stairs. It was a long way down. On the street level, the battle was getting worse. The dragon on the tower let out a roar. It opened its mouth and spat out hundreds of black balls. The balls hit the ground and broke open. More monsters crawled out. But these were different. They were tall and thin. They had swords made of darkness. They moved like soldiers. They did not just bite. They fought with skill. Starlight was surrounded. She blasted 2 of them, but 3 more jumped at her from behind. Suddenly, a car flew through the air and smashed into the monsters. It was Kimiko. She had thrown the car. She jumped into the fight. She ripped the head off a shadow soldier. The soldier turned into dust. Kimiko smiled. Butcher pulled the van up to the curb. He opened the window and fired a grenade launcher. The grenade hit a group of monsters and exploded. The fire spread quickly. The monsters screamed and ran from the flames. Butcher yelled at Starlight to get in the van. Starlight shook her head. She said she could not leave the people. Butcher called her a fool. He said she was going to die for nothing. Then Queen Maeve landed on the hood of the van. The metal crumpled. Maeve looked at Butcher. She told him to drive away. She said this was a fight for gods, not men. Butcher sneered at her. He said she wasn't a god. She was just a product in a bottle. Maeve ignored him. She jumped into the crowd of monsters. She swung her sword. It cut through the shadow bodies. But for everyone she killed, 2 more appeared. The shadows started to swirl together. They formed a wall. The wall moved toward them. High in the sky, Homelander was looking for the leader. He knew there had to be a boss. He flew up to the clouds. The black layer was thick. He punched through it. Above the clouds, the sun was still shining, but it looked dim. Floating in the middle of the darkness was a figure. It looked like a man, but he was tall and pale. He had long white hair and a black suit of armor. He held a giant sword that pulsed with red light. This was Knull. But he was not fully there. It was an avatar, a projection of his will. Homelander flew toward him. He shouted, asking who he was. The pale figure turned. He had no eyes, just black holes. He spoke, but his lips did not move. The voice was in Homelander's head. It sounded like 1,000 graveyards. The voice said, "Kneel." Homelander felt a heavy weight on his shoulders. He shouted, "No!" and fired his lasers at full power. The beams hit the pale man in the chest. The armor absorbed the heat. The pale man did not even flinch. He raised his hand. A giant hand made of shadow formed in the air and swatted Homelander. Homelander flew backward and tumbled through the air. He caught himself and flew back faster. He punched the pale man in the face. It felt like hitting a mountain. The pale man smiled. He grabbed Homelander's cape. He looked at the fabric. He said it was a cheap costume. He said Homelander was a false idol. Then he threw Homelander down toward the city. Homelander fell like a meteor. He crashed into Central Park. The impact made a crater as big as a football field. Back in the tower stairwell, A-Train and the Deep were running down. They were on the 40th floor. The lights were out. It was pitch black. A-Train was using his phone as a flashlight. He was breathing hard. He told the Deep they should have stayed in the room. The Deep stopped. He looked at a vent on the wall. Black slime was leaking out of it. The Deep walked toward it. He said the slime was singing to him. A-Train told him to get away from it. The Deep touched the slime. It shot out and wrapped around his hand. The Deep screamed. The slime moved fast. It went up his arm and covered his chest. It went into his gills. The Deep fell to the floor, shaking. A-Train tried to pull the slime off, but it was too strong. The Deep looked at A-Train. His eyes turned black. He smiled. But it was not his smile. It was a jagged smile with too many teeth. He spoke in a distorted voice. He said, "We are many." A-Train panicked. He used his super speed to run. He ran down the stairs so fast he tripped on the 20th floor and tumbled down a whole flight of stairs. He broke his leg. He lay at the bottom of the stairs, crying in pain. He heard footsteps coming down slowly from above. It was the Deep. But he looked different. He was covered in black armor now. He had claws. A-Train tried to crawl away. The symbiote Deep jumped on him. In the street, the battle was lost. The police were dead or running. The army was trying to enter the city, but the Black Dome stopped their tanks. Starlight and Maeve were back to back. They were tired. Kimiko was healing from a dozen cuts, but she was slowing down. Butcher was out of grenades. He was using a machine gun now. Frenchie was mixing a new chemical. He yelled that he needed more sulfur. Mother's Milk was shooting monsters off the roof of the van. Then they heard a sound. It was a sonic boom. Homelander rose from the crater in the park. He was bleeding from his nose and ears. His suit was ripped. He looked insane. He started killing everything. He lasered the monsters. He lasered the buildings. He lasered the cars. He did not care anymore. He just wanted to destroy. One of his lasers hit a gas station. It exploded in a massive fireball. The fire caught a group of symbiotes. They shrieked and died. Butcher saw this. He yelled that fire works best. But the explosion also knocked Starlight over. A shadow monster jumped on her. It bit her shoulder. She screamed. Her skin was tough, so the teeth did not go deep, but the slime got into the wound. The blue compound Vive in her blood reacted with the alien slime. A flash of purple lightning exploded from her wound. The monster was thrown back. Starlight fell to her knees. She felt sick. The slime in her wound was bubbling. It was feeding on the V. It was growing faster. The voice of Knull spoke to the whole city at once. Every human in Supa heard it. It said, "Your gods are weak. Your blood is sweet. Become us." The sky lowered. The black clouds touched the tops of the skyscrapers. The buildings started to get covered in the black substance. It was like moss growing in fast motion. Windows broke. The darkness entered the homes. In the Vought lab, the samples of Compound 5 started to shake in their vials. The black goo from the outside sensed the V. It broke through the walls to get to it. When the symbiotes touched the pure V in the lab, they mutated. They grew larger. They grew spikes. They became super symbiotes. They did not need hosts anymore. They were strong enough to hunt on their own. Butcher saw Starlight trying to burn the infection out of her shoulder. She used her own light to burn her skin. It smelled terrible. But it worked. The slime fell off and died. She stood up, breathing heavy. She looked at Butcher. She said they had to go. Butcher nodded. He told the boys to load up. Kimiko jumped in the back. Maeve looked at them. She looked at the tower. She decided to stay. She said someone had to distract them. Butcher did not argue. He slammed the gas pedal. The van sped away down a side street. As they drove, they saw A-Train running on the rooftops. But he was not running away. He was running alongside the monsters. He was covered in black slime with a white spider symbol on his chest. He was screeching. He was faster than before. He was hunting civilians. The symbiote had taken his speed and removed his fear. Homelander floated above the burning city. He was alone. The other members of the Seven were gone or dead or turned. He felt small. He hated feeling small. He looked up at the pale face in the sky. He wiped the blood from his nose. He decided he would not save this city. If the people were weak enough to die, they deserved it. He would fly to space. He would leave. He blasted upward. He broke the sound barrier. He flew higher and higher. He reached the Black Dome. He punched it. He expected to break through, but the dome was solid. It was like a wall of muscle. He hit it again and again. It did not break. He was trapped. The voice in his head laughed. "No escape," it said. "Only the void." Homelander floated there, touching the cold black wall. For the first time since he was a child in a lab, he cried. He was a rat in a cage, and the cat had just walked in. Down below, the transformation continued. The city was being digested. The subway tunnels were now veins for the hive. The skyscrapers were like ribs of a giant beast. The people who were caught were not all killed. Some were cocooned in the walls. They were being saved for later. Or they were being turned. The military outside the dome fired missiles. The missiles hit the black shell and did nothing. The world watched on TV as New York City became a black sphere. The news anchors were crying. The president was on Air Force One trying to hide. No one knew what to do. The heroes they trusted were either dead or monsters. The villain was not a man in a costume. It was a force of nature. Butcher drove the van into an old subway maintenance tunnel he knew about. It was the only place to hide. He parked the van in the dark. The team sat in silence. They could hear the screams from the surface. Frenchie looked at his chemicals. He said he needed a sample of the infected blood. He said if the V makes them stronger, maybe it can also kill them if he changes the formula. Mother's Milk asked how they were going to get a sample without dying. Butcher checked his gun. He said they had to find a stray dog, a lonely monster. They had to trap it. He looked at Kimiko. He said she was the bait. Kimiko nodded. She was not afraid. She wanted to rip them apart. In the Vought Tower, Queen Maeve was the last one standing. She was in the lobby. The floor was covered in bodies. She was tired. Her sword was dull. The elevator doors opened. A figure walked out. It was Black Noir. But he was not fighting the monsters. The monsters were walking around him like he was a rock. The darkness did not attack him. It seemed to ignore him. Or maybe it respected him. Black Noir walked up to Maeve. He tilted his head. He held out his hand. He was holding a piece of paper. Maeve looked at it. It was a drawing. A child's drawing of a black sun. Maeve looked at him confused. Then the shadows behind Black Noir rose up. They did not attack him because he was already empty inside. He was the perfect host. The shadows poured into his mouth and eyes. Black Noir did not scream. He just stood there and accepted it. His suit changed. It became jagged and sharp. He grew wings. He looked at Maeve. He did not speak. He just pointed his sword at her. Maeve raised her sword. She knew she could not win, but she would not kneel. She charged. The first night of the invasion ended with silence. The screaming stopped because everyone was either hidden or taken. The city was dark, except for the red glow of fires. The king in black sat on his throne in the sky and watched. He felt the power of the V in this world. It was delicious. It was chaotic. He liked it. He decided he would not just destroy this world. He would use it. He would breed a new army here, an army of super symbiotes. And with them, he would conquer the rest of the universe. The timeline had shifted. The story of superheroes was finished. The story of survival had started. General Robert Singer stood inside the Mobile Command Center tent 3 miles outside of Manhattan. The air conditioner was humming loudly, but he was sweating. On the large screens in front of him lay the feed from a drone circling the perimeter. New York City was gone. In its place was a perfect hemisphere of black matter. It looked like a hole in reality. The dome was 5 miles high and buried deep into the bedrock. Singer looked at Stan Edgar, who was sitting calmly in a folding chair. Edgar was wearing a pristine suit despite the mud on the floor. He held a glass of water and looked bored. Singer slammed his fist on the table. He asked Edgar what Vought had done. Edgar took a sip of water. He said Vought did not do this. He said they had run the numbers, and this was an extraterrestrial event. He said Vought was a victim here, just like the taxpayers. Singer laughed a bitter laugh. He pointed at the screen. He said the things inside were Supes. He said they had satellite thermal imaging before the dome closed. He saw A-Train eating people. He saw the deep, dragging ferries under the water. Edgar nodded slowly. He admitted that the biological agents seemed to be bonding with Compound 5 subjects preferentially. He called it a hostile takeover of assets. Singer told him to shut up about assets. He said he had orders from the president. They were going to breach the dome. Edgar raised an eyebrow. He asked how. Singer said they were going to use a bunker buster missile, the MOAB, the mother of all bombs. Edgar advised against it. He said they did not understand the energy absorption properties of the material. Singer ignored him. He picked up the radio handset. He gave the order to the flight lead. Inside the subway tunnels, the air was thick with the smell of mold and ozone. The emergency lights were dead. The only light came from the glow sticks Frenchie had cracked and hung on the pipes. They cast a sickly green light on the wet walls. Billy Butcher sat on a concrete ledge cleaning his rifle. He had found some incendiary rounds in a police locker. They were not much, but they were better than lead. Huey Campbell was pacing back and forth. He looked pale. He asked Butcher how long they could stay down here. Butcher did not look up. He said they would stay until they had a weapon, or until they died. He told Huey to stop moving because he was wasting oxygen. Frenchie was kneeling over a dead rat. He was dissecting it with a scalpel. The rat was covered in black slime. Frenchie looked up. His goggles were foggy. He said the biology was impossible. He said the cells of the slime were rewriting the DNA of the rat instantly. It was not just a parasite. It was a genetic overwrite. He said the V in the Supes would act like a supercharger. It would speed up the process 1,000 times. Mother's Milk was watching the tunnel entrance. He had a heavy machine gun set up on a tripod. He said he heard something. Everyone froze. The sound was faint. It sounded like water rushing, but it was rhythmic. Slosh, step, slosh, step. Butcher signaled Kimiko. She moved into the shadows. She was the only one who could get close without being heard. She crept along the ceiling pipes. Her eyes adjusted to the dark. She saw a figure walking down the tracks. It was shaped like a man, but it had fins. It was the Deep. But he was huge. The symbiote had added mass to his body. His shoulders were wide and covered in black armor plates that looked like chitin. His helmet was fused to his skull. A long tongue hung out of his mouth, dripping saliva that sizzled when it hit the rail ties. He was not alone. Behind him were 3 sharks. But they were walking. The symbiotes had given the sharks legs made of muscle and shadow. They looked like land sharks from a nightmare. The Deep stopped. He sniffed the air. He spoke. His voice was a gurgle of water and gravel. He said he could smell the fear. He said he could smell the milk. Mother's Milk tightened his grip on the gun. He knew the Deep was taunting him. Butcher whispered to hold fire. They needed a sample of the living slime. A dead rat was not enough. They needed to cut a piece off a live host. Kimiko dropped from the ceiling. She landed on the back of the last land shark. She dug her claws into its gills. The shark thrashed. It was stronger than a normal shark. Its skin was like steel. Kimiko roared and ripped a chunk of the black substance off its fin. The shark spun around and bit her arm. Its teeth went through her bone. Kimiko did not scream. She kicked the shark in the eye and jumped back to the wall. She had the sample. She threw the chunk of black goo to Frenchie. Frenchie caught it in a glass jar and sealed it tight. The goo in the jar threw itself against the glass, trying to break out. Butcher yelled to open fire. Mother's Milk pulled the trigger. The heavy machine gun roared. The bullets hit the Deep and the sharks. The rounds sparked against the black armor. The Deep laughed. He raised his hand. The water in the drainage ditch next to the tracks rose up. It turned black. The symbiote controlled the water. He threw a wave of black water at the team. Starlight stepped forward. She blasted the wave with a beam of light. The light hit the water and boiled it instantly. Steam filled the tunnel. The steam gave them cover. Butcher threw a phosphorus grenade. It exploded in a brilliant white flash. The sharks shrieked. The heat hurt them. The deep shielded his eyes. He yelled that the light burned. Butcher ordered everyone to run. They sprinted down the tunnel deeper into the dark. They could hear the deep chasing them. He was fast. He was running on the walls. Kimiko was lagging behind. Her arm was healing, but it was slow. The corruption in the bite wound was fighting her regenerative factor. Huey grabbed her good arm and pulled her. He told her not to stop. They reached a maintenance door. Butcher kicked it open. They fell into an old boiler room. Mother's Milk slammed the door and welded it shut with the portable torch he had in his pack. They could hear the deep banging on the door, the metal dented with every hit. Butcher looked at Frenchie. He asked if the sample was safe. Frenchie held up the jar. The black goo was calm now. It was watching them. It had formed a tiny eye on the surface of the slime. It was studying them. Frenchie said they needed a lab. He said he needed to separate the V interface from the alien helix. Above the ground, the sky was burning. The military had launched the attack. A flight of F-22 Raptors dropped their payloads on the dome. The explosions were massive. Fire covered the surface of the black sphere. For a moment, it looked like the sun had touched the earth. General Singer watched the screens. The smoke cleared. The dome was untouched. There was not even a scratch. Then the dome reacted. It pulsed. A ripple of purple energy moved across the surface. It opened a small hole at the very top. A beam of darkness shot out of the hole. It hit one of the jets. The jet did not explode. It turned black. It stopped flying and hovered. The pilot screamed over the radio that his controls were dead. Then the radio went silent. The jet turned around. It fired its missiles at the other jets. The symbiote had infected the machine. It was techno-organic. The black slime could bond with metal and circuitry just as easily as flesh. It hacked the plane's computer and the pilot's brain at the same time. The other pilots panicked. They broke formation. The infected jet chased them with impossible speed. It pulled turns that would kill a human pilot. It shot down 2 wingmen in 10 seconds. Singer watched in horror. He ordered a retreat. Inside the dome, Homelander was floating in the upper atmosphere near the ceiling of the cage. He had been there for hours. He was talking to himself. He was listing the names of people he had killed. He thought if he remembered everyone, he was better than them. He looked down at his city. It was a hive now. Great spires of black webbing connected the skyscrapers. He saw people being herded like cattle into Times Square. They were being put into pods. He knew what was happening. They were being processed. He felt a vibration in the air. The King in Black was manifesting again. The giant pale avatar appeared next to Homelander. Knull did not fly. He simply stood on the air. He looked at Homelander with pity. He asked why the little man was still fighting. Homelander turned his red eyes to Knull. He said he was the only god here. Knull laughed. It was a sound like breaking bones. He reached out and touched Homelander's chest. His finger went through the suit and touched the skin. Homelander tried to fly away, but he was frozen. Knull said that Homelander was empty. He said that was good. Empty cups can be filled. Knull pushed a small piece of his own shadow into Homelander's chest. It was not a violent infection like with the others. It was a seed. Homelander gasped. He felt cold. Then he felt power. A new kind of power. It did not come from the sun. It came from the void. His red eyes flickered and turned purple for a second. He shook his head. He flew backward. He screamed at Knull to get out of his head. Knull smiled and faded away. He said the seed would grow. He said Homelander would come to him when he was ready to be a king. Back in the boiler room, the banging on the door stopped. The Deep had given up, or he found another way in. The boys were catching their breath. Starlight was looking at her hands. They were trembling. She said she felt the darkness when she used her light. She said it felt like the shadows were pulling at her energy, like they were eating the light as fast as she could make it. Butcher told her to toughen up. He said she was the only heavy hitter they had left. Frenchie set up a makeshift lab on a rusty table. He used the heat from the boiler and some chemicals from his bag. He took a drop of the black goo and put it on a slide. He looked through a portable microscope. He gasped. He told the others to look. The cells of the symbiote were attacking each other. They were cannibalistic. But when he added a drop of Starlight's blood, which he had on a bandage, the cells stopped fighting. They aligned. They became a perfect lattice. Frenchie said the V was the binding agent. The symbiotes were chaotic by nature, but Compound 5 gave them structure. It made them stable. This was why the Supes were such good hosts. They were the perfect vessels. Frenchie said to kill them, they needed to break that bond. They needed a frequency that would shatter the V structure. He said he could build a sonic emitter, but he needed parts. He needed a high-frequency pulse generator. Butcher asked where they could get one. Frenchie looked at the map of the subway. He pointed to a station near Vought Tower. He said Vought had a secure server farm there. They used sonic cooling for the supercomputers. The plan was suicide. Going back toward the tower was madness. But they had no choice. They geared up. They opened the back door of the boiler room, which led to the old service tunnels. They walked into the dark. As they moved, they saw the walls changing. The concrete was covered in veins. The veins pulsed. The city was alive. They passed a group of cocoons glued to the wall. Butcher shined his light on one. Inside the translucent sack was a woman. She was asleep. Tubes of black slime were going into her nose and mouth. She was being kept alive. Butcher raised his gun to put her out of her misery. Huey grabbed his arm. He shook his head. He whispered that if they shot, the noise would bring the horde. Butcher stared at Huey. He saw the fear in the kid's eyes, but also the resolve. Butcher lowered the gun. He spat on the floor. They kept moving. High above in the penthouse of Vought Tower, Black Noir was standing on the balcony. He was fully transformed. His wings were spread wide. He was the Watcher. He saw the heat signatures of the rats in the tunnels. He could see through the concrete. The symbiote gave him thermal vision that penetrated stone. He saw Butcher and his team moving toward the server farm. Black Noir tilted his head. He did not alert the others. He wanted to hunt them himself. He had always hated Butcher. He jumped off the balcony. He did not fly. He dived. He folded his wings and became a missile. He crashed through the street pavement 5 blocks away from the tower. He landed in the subway tunnel right in front of the team. The impact knocked everyone down. Dust and debris filled the air. Black Noir stood up. He was 10 feet tall now. His suit was a living skin of obsidian. He drew his knives. The knives were made of shadow, but they were sharp enough to cut atoms. He looked at Butcher. He pointed a clawed finger at him. Butcher stood up, groaning. He looked at the monster that used to be a silent ninja. He smirked. He said he always knew Noir was a freak. Noir lunged. Kimiko intercepted him. She slammed into him with the force of a truck. But Noir did not move. He caught Kimiko by the throat with one hand. He squeezed. Kimiko choked. She slashed at his face, but her claws just sparked against his armor. Noir threw her down the tunnel like a rag doll. Starlight fired a blast of light. Noir raised his cape. The cape absorbed the light. He laughed. It was a silent laugh, but they felt it in their chests. He walked toward Starlight. Mother's Milk fired the machine gun. The bullets bounced off. Noir was bulletproof. He was unstoppable. He backhanded Mother's Milk, sending him crashing into a pillar. Huey was the only one left standing next to Butcher. Huey held a small pistol. His hand was shaking. Noir looked at Huey. He did not see a threat. He ignored him. He walked toward Butcher. He grabbed Butcher by the jacket and lifted him up. He brought his face close to Butcher. His mask peeled back to reveal a mouth full of needle teeth and a long serpentine tongue. Suddenly, a loud noise filled the tunnel. It was a train horn. But there were no trains running. A train came sprinting down the tunnel from the other direction. But he was not coming to help Noir. He was running from something. He was terrified. The speedster symbiote was panicking. He slammed into Noir by accident. The impact broke the sound barrier. Both monsters went tumbling. Butcher fell to the ground. He looked down the tunnel where A-Train had come from. A red mist was approaching. It was moving slowly. It was dissolving everything it touched. The rails, the walls, the webs. It was Queen Maeve. But she was not a symbiote. She was burning. She was literally on fire. Her skin was glowing cherry red. She was walking, and her heat was so intense it was vaporizing the symbiote's matter. She had pushed her durability to the absolute limit. She was dying, but she was taking them with her. She looked at Butcher. Her eyes were white-hot. She shouted for them to run. She was a living nuclear reactor. The heat was keeping the infection at bay, but she was melting from the inside out. Noir shrieked. The heat hurt him. He tried to stand, but A-Train was tangled with him. Maeve charged. She tackled both of them. The three Supes crashed through the wall into the next tunnel. The heat was unbearable. Butcher scrambled to his feet. He grabbed Frenchie and Huey. They ran. They left the battle of the Titans behind them. They could hear the screams of the symbiotes burning. Maeve was buying them time. They reached the server farm entrance. It was a heavy steel door. Frenchie hacked the keypad. The door hissed open. They fell inside. The room was freezing cold. The server racks were humming. The liquid nitrogen cooling systems were running. Frenchie ran to the main console. He started pulling out components. He worked feverishly. Butcher leaned against the door listening. The screaming outside had stopped. There was a heavy silence. Then a thud against the door. Then another. The metal began to heat up. Something was melting through the door. It was not Maeve. Maeve's fire was red. This heat was black. It was a plasma cutter made of dark energy. The symbiotes had adapted. They had learned from Maeve. They had eaten her fire and made it their own. Butcher looked at Frenchie. He asked if the machine was ready. Frenchie connected 2 wires. A high-pitched whine filled the room. He nodded. He said it was a prototype. 1 shot. Butcher smiled. He said 1 shot was all they ever got. Outside the dome, the world was holding its breath. The failure of the airstrike had caused a geopolitical crisis. China and Russia were mobilizing their own nukes. They did not trust the U.S. to contain the infection. They wanted to glass the entire eastern seaboard. The president was on the hotline begging for time. Stan Edgar was on a private jet flying to a secret Vought facility in Nevada. He was looking at a file marked Soldier Boy. He knew that if the new gods were taking over, he needed an old devil to fight them. He needed the only weapon that could burn the V out of a subject's blood. He picked up the satellite phone. He made the call to open the cryo chamber. In the server room, the door melted through. A black liquid poured in. It formed into a shape. It was Homelander. But he was different now. His suit was black. The American flag cape was tattered and gray. His eyes were purple. The seed Knull planted had bloomed. He was the avatar of the void. He looked at the boys. He did not laser them. He simply smiled. He said he had come to save them. He said pain was temporary, but the darkness was forever. He took a step forward. The freezing air did not bother him. Frenchie pointed the sonic device at him. He pressed the button. A wave of distortion fired. It hit Homelander. The sound was so high it shattered the glass of the server racks. Homelander stopped. The black suit rippled. The symbiote screamed. For a second, Homelander's human face came through. He looked confused. He looked scared. He whispered, "Help me." Then the purple light returned to his eyes. The symbiote clamped down harder. It adapted to the frequency. The sound stopped hurting him. It started to feed him. Homelander laughed. He destroyed the device with a casual wave of his hand. He looked at Butcher. He said that was a good trick. But playtime was over. He raised his eyes to laser them. Suddenly, the wall behind the servers exploded. A subway train smashed through the concrete. It was being pushed by something massive. The train crushed Homelander against the wall. It buried him under tons of steel. From the hole in the wall, a giant hand reached out. It was not a symbiote. It was a hand made of clear organic glass. It was translucent. Everyone thought he was dead. But Vought never threw anything away. They had kept his indestructible skin. The symbiote had found his remains in the tower morgue. It had filled the empty skin with black slime. It was a puppet made of diamond skin and shadow muscle. The translucent zombie roared. It was not attacking Homelander. It was attacking everyone. It was a berserker. In the chaos, Butcher saw an exit vent. He yelled at the team to move. They climbed into the vent just as Homelander tore the train in half. They crawled through the tight space. They could hear the slaughter behind them. They had the sample. They had the data. But they had lost the element of surprise, and they knew now that there was no weapon on Earth that could stop what Homelander had become. They needed something from off the board. They crawled into the night of the Undercity, while above them the dome began to expand. It grew 10 miles in every direction. It swallowed Newark. It swallowed Long Island. The kingdom of Knull was growing, and it was hungry. Stan Edgar stepped out of the private jet onto the cracked tarmac of the secret airstrip in the Nevada desert. The air was dry and hot, which was a sharp contrast to the cold, damp horror of New York. He walked calmly toward a bunker door that was guarded by men in heavy hazmat suits. He did not show his ID. They knew who he was. The doors opened with a heavy groan of rusty hydraulics. Edgar walked down a long concrete corridor that smelled of stale air and decades of secrets. He reached the main control room. Technicians were scrambling around monitoring a large cryotube in the center of the room. The glass was frosted over. Inside, a shadow of a man was suspended in suspended animation. Edgar pressed the intercom button. He ordered them to initiate the thaw sequence. The technicians hesitated. One of them said the subject was unstable and radioactive. Edgar looked at the man with cold eyes. He said the world was currently being eaten by space aliens, and he did not care about radiation protocols. He said, "Wake him up." The technicians typed the commands. Steam hissed from the tube. The frost melted. The heavy locking mechanisms clanked open. The door swung out. A cloud of nitrogen gas rolled across the floor. A man stumbled out of the fog. He was wearing green tactical pants and no shirt. His chest was covered in scars. He coughed and spat a mouthful of blue liquid onto the floor. He looked up at Edgar. It was Soldier Boy. He looked confused and angry. He asked what year it was. Edgar told him it was the end of the world. Soldier Boy laughed. He grabbed a metal table and crushed the edge of it with his bare hand. He asked if the Russians finally dropped the bomb. Edgar shook his head. He handed Soldier Boy a tablet. The screen showed the live feed of New York, the Black Dome, the monsters, Homelander floating with purple eyes. Soldier Boy watched the screen. He frowned. He asked what the hell he was looking at. Edgar said it was the replacement. He said Vought had made a mistake. They replaced a soldier with a spoiled child, and now the child had found a new father. Edgar said he needed a soldier again. He needed someone to kill the bad product. Soldier Boy looked at Homelander's face on the screen. He recognized the jawline. He recognized the arrogance. He spat again. He said he would do it. But he wanted a bottle of bourbon and a steak first. Edgar nodded. He said he could have whatever he wanted after he killed the King in Black. Inside the dome, the infection was evolving. The black slime was not just covering buildings anymore, it was changing them. The steel of the skyscrapers was twisting into organic shapes. The Empire State Building looked like a giant spinal column. The streets were rivers of black ichor. The air was filled with spores that choked anyone who did not have a filter. The boys were hiding in the basement of a pharmacy in Queens. They had managed to move away from the city center through the storm drains. They were exhausted. Frenchie was working on a radio. He was trying to find a frequency that could penetrate the dome. The black shell blocked all standard signals. But Frenchie had a theory. The symbiotes were a hive mind. They communicated instantly. If he could tap into their psychic frequency, he might be able to send a message out. Or listen in. Huey was sitting on the floor bandaging Kimiko's arm. The wound from the shark was looking bad. The veins around it were turning black. She was shivering. Her eyes were glazing over. Butcher paced the room. He was running on rage and caffeine pills. He kicked a shelf of vitamins over. He said they were sitting ducks. He said they needed to move before the new Homelander found them. Mother's Milk was watching the stairs. He held a shotgun. He said there was nowhere to go. The dome was solid. They were trapped in a fishbowl with a shark. Suddenly, the radio crackled. It was not static. It was a voice. But it was not human. It was a screeching sound that Frenchie's equipment translated into audio. It was a tactical command. Sector 4. Breach detected. The outlier has entered. Frenchie looked at Butcher. He said something had broken into the dome. Something the symbiotes were afraid of. Butcher grabbed the radio. He asked where Sector 4 was. Frenchie checked a map. He said it was the Lincoln Tunnel entrance. Butcher grabbed his rifle. He said that was their exit. Or their funeral. He told the team to load up. They had to carry Kimiko. She was too weak to walk. Starlight used her powers to cauterize the worst of the infection on Kimiko's arm, but it was only slowing it down. They moved out into the street. The sky was a swirling vortex of purple and black clouds. They stuck to the shadows. They saw patrols of symbiote dogs sniffing the cars. They saw winged creatures circling the towers. The city was quiet in a way that was worse than the screaming. It was the silence of a graveyard. At the Lincoln Tunnel entrance, the scene was chaos. A massive hole had been blown through the black wall of the dome. The edges of the hole were glowing red-hot. Standing in the middle of the wreckage was Soldier Boy. He was wearing his full suit. He held his shield. He was surrounded by 100 shadow monsters. He looked bored. A symbiote with 4 arms charged him. Soldier Boy did not even raise his shield. He punched the monster in the face. His fist hit with the force of a cannonball. The monster's head exploded. But then something strange happened. The black slime tried to reattach. It tried to heal. Soldier Boy's chest began to glow. A beam of nuclear energy fired from his torso. It hit the mass of monsters. The beam did not just burn them. It erased them. The radiation stripped the Compound 5 out of their cells. Without the V to stabilize them, the symbiotes lost their bond with the host meat. The monsters fell apart into piles of dry ash and black puddles. Soldier Boy walked forward through the dust. He crushed a skull under his boot. He yelled out, asking if that was the best the space bugs could do. High above in the spire of the Vought Tower, Homelander felt the disturbance. He felt a sharp pain in his mind. It was like a part of his body had been cut off. He clutched his head. The voice of Knull whispered in his ear. An old poison, the voice said. A weapon from the past. Homelander looked at the screen in the tower. He saw Soldier Boy. He stopped breathing for a second. He remembered the stories. He remembered the fear in Stan Edgar's eyes whenever that name was mentioned. Homelander's purple eyes narrowed. He felt a new emotion. It was not fear. It was jealousy. He flew out of the tower. He did not go alone. He let out a sonic scream that commanded his generals. From the East River, the Deep emerged riding a massive kraken made of shadow. From the subways, A-Train sprinted up the side of a building, his legs pumping like pistons. From the shadows of the alleyways, Black Noir materialized. They converged on the Lincoln Tunnel. The boys reached the tunnel entrance just as Soldier Boy was reloading his pistol. He saw them coming. He aimed his gun at Butcher. Butcher raised his hands. He yelled that they were on the same side. Soldier Boy lowered the gun slightly. He looked at Starlight. He sneered. He asked if she was one of the Vought show ponies. Butcher stepped forward. He said he knew who Soldier Boy was. He said he knew Edgar sent him. He said they could help him find Homelander. Soldier Boy laughed. He said he did not need help from a bunch of civilians. He said he was going to march to the tower and spank his replacement. Suddenly the ground shook. A wave of black water crashed over the highway barrier. The Deep landed on top of an overturned truck. He looked more monster than man now. His armor was thick and spiked. He roared at Soldier Boy. Soldier Boy looked at the Deep. He asked what kind of calamari this was. The Deep raised his trident. A beam of dark energy shot out of it. Soldier Boy blocked it with his shield. The energy splashed against the metal. Soldier Boy grunted. He said that actually stung. A-Train hit Soldier Boy from behind. He was moving at Mach 3. The impact sent Soldier Boy flying through a concrete divider. A-Train circled around for another pass. He was a blur of black motion. But Soldier Boy was a veteran. He timed the loop. As A-Train came around, Soldier Boy threw his shield. The shield ricocheted off a wall and hit A-Train in the legs. A-Train tumbled and crashed. He tried to get up, but his leg was shattered. The symbiote on his leg formed a cast, instantly pulling the bones back together. A-Train screamed in pain and rage. He stood up again. The healing was instantaneous. Soldier Boy looked impressed. He said they were tough. Butcher opened fire on the Deep with his high-caliber rifle. The bullets sparked off the armor. Starlight blasted A-Train with a blinding flash. It slowed him down. Then the sky darkened further. Homelander descended. He did not land. He hovered 20 feet off the ground. His cape rippled like a funeral shroud. He looked at Soldier Boy. For a long moment, nobody spoke. It was the meeting of two eras, the original and the upgrade. Homelander spoke first. He said Soldier Boy looked old. He said the world had moved on. Soldier Boy spat blood on the ground. He said he didn't see a world. He saw a mess. He said he was here to clean it up. Homelander's eyes glowed purple. He fired his heat vision. The beams were black and red now. They hit Soldier Boy in the chest. Soldier Boy staggered back. His suit smoked. The skin underneath blistered. But he did not fall. He walked forward against the pressure of the beams. He started to charge his chest blast. The radioactive glow built up. Homelander saw the light. He sensed the danger. The radiation was the one thing that could hurt the V inside him. Homelander stopped firing and flew upward to dodge. But Soldier Boy released the blast. The explosion was blinding. It engulfed the entire intersection. It hit the Deep and A-Train. The Deep screamed as the radiation boiled the water in his cells. The symbiote on him writhed in agony. It tried to detach from the dying host. A-Train ran, but he could not outrun light. The wave hit him. He fell to the ground, gasping. His speed was gone. The V was burned out of his system. The symbiote on him shriveled and died, leaving him a broken, normal man on the asphalt. But Homelander was fast enough. He had flown above the blast radius. He looked down at the devastation. He saw his generals defeated in one shot. He felt real fear now. This man was a true threat. But Homelander was also learning. The symbiote whispered to him. It told him that energy could be absorbed if he was strong enough, if he submitted fully to the void. Homelander made a choice. He closed his eyes and let the darkness inside him take the wheel. His muscles expanded. His skin turned a pale gray. Sharp horns grew from his forehead. He was shedding his humanity completely. He dived at Soldier Boy. Soldier Boy was weakened by the blast. He fell to one knee. Butcher ran to him. He grabbed Soldier Boy's arm. He said they had to move. He said Homelander was coming back, and Soldier Boy needed time to recharge. Soldier Boy tried to push him away, but he was drained. Starlight blasted a wall of light to cover their retreat. They dragged Soldier Boy into the maintenance tunnels of the Lincoln Tunnel. Homelander crashed into the ground where they had just been. He roared. The sound shattered the windows of every car for a mile. He ripped the asphalt up with his bare hands. He screamed that there was no hiding. The King in Black spoke to him again. "Let them run," Knull said. "The hunt makes the meat sweeter." Homelander calmed down. He looked at the broken bodies of A-Train and the Deep. A-Train was still alive, but he was just a human now, crying and holding his legs. Homelander looked at him with disgust. He walked over to A-Train. A-Train begged for help. Homelander stepped on A-Train's head. He crushed it. He said he had no use for weaklings. The Deep was dead. The radiation had killed him. Homelander looked at the tunnel entrance. He smiled a jagged, toothy smile. He turned to the remaining symbiotes. He told them to seal the exits. No one leaves the dome. The boys and Soldier Boy retreated deep into the tunnel ventilation system. They found a large fan room and barricaded the door. Soldier Boy sat against a wall, breathing heavy. He looked at his hands. They were trembling. He said that kid was stronger than he looked. Butcher handed him a flask of whiskey. Soldier Boy drank it all in one gulp. He looked at Butcher. He asked what the plan was. Butcher looked at the team. They were battered. Kimiko was unconscious. Huey was terrified. Starlight was exhausted. Frenchie was looking at his readings. Frenchie said he saw something during the blast. When Soldier Boy fired, the radiation didn't just burn the V. It disrupted the hive mind signal. For a split second, the dome flickered. Frenchie said if they could amplify Soldier Boy's blast, if they could hook him up to the city's power grid and channel his energy through the Vought Tower transmitter, they could turn him into a bomb that would wipe out the infection in the entire city. It would kill every Supe in New York, including Starlight, including Kimiko, and probably Soldier Boy himself. Butcher looked at Starlight. She was wiping dirt off her face. She didn't know what Frenchie was saying. Butcher looked at Soldier Boy. He saw the look in the old soldier's eyes. Soldier Boy didn't care who died as long as he won. Butcher made a decision. He told Frenchie to figure out the wiring. He said they were going to Vought Tower. Frenchie whispered that it would kill Annie. Butcher grabbed Frenchie by the collar. He whispered back that if they didn't do it, everyone dies anyway. He said it was a necessary casualty. Huey was listening. He didn't hear everything, but he saw the look on Butcher's face. He knew Butcher was planning something dark. Outside the dome, the U.S. military was retreating. The president ordered a quarantine zone of 100 miles around New York. The world leaders were holding an emergency summit. They were discussing the Samson option, a total nuclear sterilization of the North American eastern coast. Stan Edgar watched the news from his bunker. He poured himself a glass of wine. He knew the clock was ticking. He knew Soldier Boy was inside. It was all a gamble now. In the heart of the city, the darkness was gathering. Knull's avatar grew larger. He was feeding on the psychic distress of millions of people. He began to construct a spire in Central Park, a massive tower of living abyss. He was building a receiver. He was calling his fleet. The stars above New York began to blink out one by one. The darkness was not just on Earth. It was coming from space. The invasion fleet of the symbiote dragons was approaching. The events in New York were just the beachhead. If the boys failed to stop the signal, the entire planet would be enveloped in shadow within days. Back in the fan room, Kimiko woke up. Her eyes were black. The infection had reached her brain. She looked at Frenchie. She did not speak. She lunged. She was fast. She pinned Frenchie to the ground. Her mouth opened and rows of shark-like teeth appeared. The symbiote had taken her. Frenchie stared up at the woman he loved. He couldn't reach his gun. Butcher raised his rifle. He aimed at Kimiko's head. Huey screamed no. He jumped in front of the gun. Butcher yelled to move. The symbiote Kimiko raised a claw to rip Frenchie's throat out. Suddenly a hand grabbed her neck. It was Starlight. Her eyes were glowing, blinding white. She placed her hand on Kimiko's chest. She pushed all her power into her friend. She burned the light into the darkness. Kimiko screamed. The black slime on her face bubbled and peeled away. It shrieked as it died. Starlight kept pouring energy until her nose bled. The symbiote was purged. Kimiko collapsed, breathing normal air again. She was human. Starlight fell back, fainting from exhaustion. Soldier Boy watched this. He raised an eyebrow. He said the girl had guts. He stood up. He felt his power returning. He looked at Butcher. He said, "Let's go kill the bastard." The team stood up. They were broken. They were bleeding. They were distrustful of each other. But they were moving. They headed toward the heart of the darkness, toward the tower that was now the throne of the king. The enemy was not just a monster, but a god. The allies were willing to sacrifice each other. The clock was ticking down to a nuclear holocaust or an alien assimilation. The final run to Vought Tower had begun. The city was a labyrinth of horrors, and the only way out was through the center of the void. The metal grate of the ventilation shaft kicked open and clattered onto the marble floor of the Vought Tower lobby. It echoed like a gunshot in a canyon. Billy Butcher crawled out first, his rifle raised and sweeping the darkness. The air inside the tower was not like the air outside. It was hot and humid and smelled of copper and rotting flowers. The lobby was unrecognizable. The giant statues of the Seven were draped in thick curtains of black webbing. The gold plating was tarnished by the acidic slime that dripped from the ceiling. The reception desk was crushed. Behind it, the wall of screens that usually played Vought news on a loop was dead, except for one screen in the center that flickered with static and occasionally showed a purple eye looking around the room. Soldier Boy dropped down next to Butcher. He brushed the dust off his shoulders and looked around with a sneer. He said the place looked like a cheap brothel for aliens. He walked over to a velvet rope and kicked it over. He was seemingly unbothered by the horror around him. To him, this was just another war zone, and he had seen enough of them to stop caring about the decor. Starlight helped Kimiko down from the vent. Kimiko was pale, but moving under her own power. The purge had worked, but it left her drained. Starlight looked at the banners hanging from the balcony. They were pictures of her and Homelander smiling. The black slime had grown over Homelander's face on the poster, making him look like the monster he had become. She felt a shiver of guilt. She had helped build this lie. Now the lie was eating the world. Frenchie and Mother's Milk brought up the rear carrying the heavy equipment cases. They had stripped the components from the server farm and improvised a signal booster. It was heavy and delicate. Frenchie looked at his scanner. He whispered that the tower was alive. He said the structural supports were being replaced by biomass. The building was not just a building anymore. It was a giant organ, an antenna made of meat and steel. Butcher told them to keep it moving. He said the elevators were dead traps, so they had to take the service stairs. 80 floors up. Soldier Boy groaned. He asked if there was a bar on the way up. Butcher ignored him and pushed the door to the stairwell open. The stairwell was covered in the same black moss as the streets. It crunched under their boots. As they climbed, they passed landings where the doors had been welded shut by the secretion. From behind those doors, they could hear sounds. Scratches. Whimpers. The staff of Vought who had been trapped inside were still there. They were being kept for something. Huey stopped at the 10th floor landing. He heard a voice he recognized. It was Ashley. She was screaming for a lawyer. She was screaming that this was a violation of her contract. Butcher grabbed Huey's jacket and pulled him forward. He told him to leave it. He said she was gone. Huey looked at the door. He wanted to help, but he knew Butcher was right. They had one mission. By the time they reached the 40th floor, the team was breathing hard. The heat was increasing. The higher they went, the closer they got to the center of the hive. Soldier Boy was the only one not sweating. His physiology was a nuclear reactor. He burned the toxins out of his blood before they could tire him. He stopped to drink from his flask. He looked at Huey, who was leaning against the railing, gasping for air. Soldier Boy laughed. He said the kids these days were soft. He said in his day they marched 20 miles with a bullet in the leg and thanked the sergeant for the exercise. Huey glared at him. He hated Soldier Boy. He hated his arrogance. He hated that they needed him. They reached the 50th floor. This was the marketing and analytics division. The door was broken off its hinges. Butcher signaled for a halt. He wanted to check the floor to see if they could access the building's power trunk here. They walked into the bullpen. It was a slaughterhouse. Desks were overturned. But in the center of the room, the symbiotes had built something new. It was a nursery. Rows of black eggs were glued to the floor. They were pulsing. Inside each egg was a silhouette. Frenchie walked closer, his curiosity warring with his fear. He shined his light on an egg. The silhouette inside was a baby, a human baby. But the eyes were open and pitch black. The symbiote was bonding with infants, creating a generation that would never know humanity. Mother's Milk gagged. He turned away. He thought of his own daughter. He gripped his shotgun so tight his knuckles turned white. He asked Butcher if they were going to burn it. Butcher shook his head. He said if they fired a shot now, the whole tower would wake up. They had to be ghosts. Soldier Boy walked up to an egg. He looked at it. He pulled the pin on a grenade from his belt. Butcher hissed at him to stop. Soldier Boy looked at Butcher. He said he wasn't going to let these things hatch. He said that was bad strategy. He dropped the grenade into the cluster of eggs and walked out the door. Butcher cursed and shoved the team into the hallway just as the grenade exploded. The boom shook the floor. The silence that followed was heavy. Then came the screeching. It started from the elevator shafts. It came from the vents. The hive had been poked. Butcher punched Soldier Boy in the jaw. Soldier Boy didn't flinch. He just smiled. He said now they knew we were here. He said he preferred a straight fight anyway. He raised his shield as a swarm of drone symbiotes burst from the ceiling tiles. They were fast, small, monkey-like creatures with razor claws. The hallway became a kill box. Butcher fired his rifle in controlled bursts, blowing the heads off the drones. Mother's Milk unleashed his shotgun, turning the creatures into black mist. Kimiko moved like a whirlwind, slicing through the horde with her claws. But there were too many of them. They were swarming over Soldier Boy. He didn't bother shooting. He used his shield. He bashed them into paste against the walls. He grabbed two of them by the necks and smashed their heads together. He was laughing. He was enjoying it. Starlight blasted a corridor of light through the swarm, clearing a path to the stairs. She yelled for them to move. They fought their way up 10 more floors. The resistance was getting heavier. They were not just fighting drones anymore. They were fighting turned security guards in tactical gear covered in living armor. They reached the 80th floor. The executive labs. This was where they needed to be to access the main transmitter coupling. They barricaded the door behind them. Mother's Milk welded it shut again. They could hear the army pounding on the other side. The metal began to buckle. The lab was dark, lit only by the emergency strobes. In the center of the room was a large glass cylinder. Inside the cylinder was a swirling vortex of blue liquid. Pure compound Vi. The reserve supply for the 7. But the symbiotes had tapped into it. Black veins ran from the cylinder into the walls, feeding the building. Frenchie ran to the main console. He threw his bag down and started pulling out cables. He said he needed 5 minutes to bypass the encryption and link Soldier Boy's energy signature to the building's broadcast dish. Butcher stood guard over Frenchie. He looked at Soldier Boy. He told him to get ready. He told him to start charging up. Soldier Boy took a deep breath. His chest started to glow. The radiation counter on Frenchie's belt started clicking rapidly. Huey walked over to Frenchie. He wanted to help. He looked at the schematics on the screen. He saw the wave propagation model Frenchie was building. It was a jagged red line that covered the entire tri-state area. Huey read the notes on the side of the screen. Target: V-structure decomposition. Lethality: 100%. Huey froze. He looked at the parameters. The frequency wasn't just disrupting the symbiotes. It was targeting the compound Vi molecule itself, breaking it down at an atomic level. Huey looked at Starlight. She was standing by the window, watching the black cloud swirl outside. She looked tired, but strong. She had V in her blood. She was born with it. It was part of her DNA. If this machine went off, it wouldn't just strip her powers. It would unravel her cellular structure. It would kill her, and Kimiko, and any other Supe who hadn't been turned yet. Huey grabbed Frenchie's arm. He whispered harshly, asking if Frenchie knew what this would do. Frenchie didn't look up. He kept typing. His hands were shaking. He whispered back, "Oui." He said he knew. He said Butcher knew. Huey felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at Butcher. Butcher was watching the door. He refused to make eye contact with Huey. Huey walked over to Butcher. He shoved him. He asked him if it was true. Butcher didn't move. He looked at Huey with dead eyes. He said it was war. In war, you don't save everyone. You save who you can. He said Starlight knew the risks. Huey looked at Annie. She turned around. She saw the look on Huey's face. She realized he had found out. She walked over. She took Huey's hand. She said it was okay. She said she had talked to Butcher in the van. She agreed to it. She said if she died to save the world, it was a good trade. Huey pulled his hand away. He said no. He said that wasn't a trade. That was murder. He said they were supposed to be better than Vought. Better than Homelander. If they sacrificed their friends for a win, they were just the same. Soldier Boy chimed in. He was glowing brighter now. He said, "Stop whining." He said the girl was a soldier. Soldiers die. He said he was doing her a favor. The pounding on the door stopped. The silence was sudden and terrifying. Then a voice came over the intercom system. It was Homelander. But the voice was layered, distorted. "I can hear your heartbeats," he said. "I can smell your betrayal." The wall next to the door didn't break. It dissolved. A black mist poured in. From the mist stepped Black Noir. He was different now. He had evolved. He was no longer just a man in a suit. He was a creature of pure void. His body was shifting constantly like smoke. He held two swords that looked like shards of broken space. He didn't run. He glided. Soldier Boy stepped forward. He shouted, "Earhart!" He thought this was just another rematch. He fired a beam of radiation from his chest. The beam hit Noir. But instead of burning him, Noir simply opened a hole in his chest. The beam passed right through him and melted the wall behind him. Noir closed the hole. He tilted his head. He flickered and reappeared instantly in front of Soldier Boy. He drove a sword into Soldier Boy's shoulder. Soldier Boy roared. The blade was cold. Absolute zero. It froze his flesh. Soldier Boy backhanded Noir, but his fist went through the smoke. Noir solidified behind him and kicked Soldier Boy in the spine. The impact cracked the floor. Soldier Boy fell. He was outmatched. His brute force meant nothing against a ghost. Kimiko screamed and charged. Noir didn't even look at her. He extended a tendril of shadow from his back and swatted her away. She hit the glass cylinder of compound fief. The glass cracked. Blue liquid began to leak out. Butcher opened fire with the rifle. The bullets passed through Noir. Butcher realized physical damage was useless. He yelled at Frenchie to finish the sequence. Frenchie was typing frantically. He said he needed the connection. He threw a cable to Butcher. He said, "Connect it to Soldier Boy." Butcher grabbed the heavy copper cable. He ran towards Soldier Boy, who was grappling with the smoke monster. Soldier Boy was glowing hot, trying to burn Noir away. Butcher jammed the cable into a port on Soldier Boy's suit that Frenchie had rigged earlier. The connection sparked. "Do it!" Butcher yelled. Frenchie's finger hovered over the enter key. This was the moment. The small choice. Huey was standing next to the console. He saw the code. He saw the frequency variable. He had a split second. He could let Frenchie press the button and kill Starlight and Kimiko and maybe save the world. Or he could intervene. Huey didn't think. He acted on instinct. He slammed his hand down on the keyboard not to hit enter, but to type a command. He entered a filter algorithm. He isolated the frequency of the V24 variant, the temporary V, and he excluded the specific harmonic resonance of Starlight's bioelectric energy. He had memorized it from Vought's files months ago. It was a sloppy patch. It was a desperate hack. By excluding her signature, he created a gap in the wave, a hole in the net. Frenchie saw the screen flash yellow. Warning. Waveform unstable. He looked at Huey with wide eyes. Huey looked back, tears streaming down his face. He mouthed, "I can't." Frenchie hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he pressed enter. The machine roared to life. A pulse of energy surged from Soldier Boy through the cable into the building's grid. The entire Vought Tower vibrated. The transmitter on the roof fired. A wave of golden radiation exploded from the tower. It swept across the city. The effect was immediate, but it was not total. In the room, Black Noir shrieked. The radiation solidified him. It forced him back into a physical form. It burned the shadow off his skin. He fell to his knees, smoking. The connection to Knull was disrupted but not severed. Outside the dome, the wave hit the symbiote army. Thousands of the smaller monsters dissolved into dust. The black clouds over the city thinned, letting sunlight pierce through for the first time in days. The Red River Battery kids in the basement woke up as the slime binding them withered. But Starlight did not die. She fell to the ground, gasping, holding her chest. She felt like she was on fire, but she was alive. Kimiko collapsed unconscious, but breathing. Butcher looked at the screen. He saw the efficiency rating, 68%. The blast had failed to reach critical mass. It hadn't killed the Alpha. It hadn't killed Homelander. Soldier Boy fell forward exhausted. The blast had drained him completely. He was just a man now, until he could recharge. Then the ceiling tore open. Homelander descended. He was not dissolved. He was scarred. His black suit was burned in places, revealing gray skin underneath. One of his purple eyes was blind, milky white. But he was standing. The gap in the frequency, the one Huey created to save Annie, had been just enough for Homelander to survive. He had shielded himself in the blind spot of the wave. He looked at the team. He looked at the smoking ruins of his tower. He looked at Huey. Homelander smiled. But it was not a happy smile. It was a smile of pure revelation. "You missed," Homelander whispered. He didn't use his lasers. He used his mind. He reached out with telekinesis, a new power granted by the void. He lifted Frenchie and Mother's Milk into the air and pinned them against the wall. He crushed the console with a thought. "You tried to use the light to kill the dark," Homelander said, floating down to the floor. "But you forgot. Shadows exist because of the light." He walked over to Soldier Boy, who was trying to crawl to his shield. Homelander stepped on Soldier Boy's hand, breaking the fingers. He looked at his father. "You're empty, old man," Homelander said. "I'm full. I am the Legion." Butcher pulled his pistol and fired until the clip was empty. The bullets bounced off Homelander's skin. Homelander backhanded Butcher, sending him flying through the broken glass of the lab window. Butcher tumbled out into the open air, falling 80 stories. Huey screamed, "Butcher!" Homelander turned to Huey. "Don't worry," he said. "He won't die from the fall. The city will catch him." As Butcher fell, he didn't scream. He watched the tower receding. He saw the golden wave fading. He saw the black clouds reforming. The hole Huey had punched in the attack was closing. The gamble had failed. The small choice to save one life had doomed the strike. Butcher fell into the mist. A massive winged shape rose from the streets below to catch him. It wasn't a rescue. It was a capture. Back in the lab, Homelander stood over the defeated team. He looked at Starlight. "You survived," he said, sounding almost impressed. "My little traitor." "You think you were spared?" He grabbed Starlight by the hair and lifted her up. "You weren't spared," he hissed. "You were saved for dessert." The tower shook again, but this time it wasn't a machine. It was an arrival. The sky above New York finally broke open completely. The invasion fleet had arrived. Massive bioships made of living darkness descended from the atmosphere. They looked like ancient gods descending to claim their tribute. Homelander looked up through the hole in the ceiling. He dropped Starlight. He spread his arms wide. "Father is here," he said. The hope of the weapon was gone. The team was captured or scattered. Butcher was falling into the abyss, and the King in Black had physically arrived to take his throne. The escalation was absolute. There was no tactical retreat left. There was only the belly of the beast. Billy Butcher woke up in hell. He was not dead. He was suspended upside down in the center of Madison Square Garden. The arena was no longer a place for sports or concerts. It was the stomach of the invasion. The seats were covered in pulsating gray matter. The floor was a lake of black digestion fluid. Butcher tried to move, but his arms and legs were pinned by thick tendrils of slime. He was not alone. Thousands of people hung around him like meat in a locker. Most were asleep or dead. Some were changing. Butcher coughed. His chest felt heavy. He looked down at his own body. A black stain was spreading across his trench coat. It was a symbiote trying to bond with him. It was crawling up his neck. It whispered in his ear. It promised him power. It promised him the strength to kill Homelander. It promised to fix his brain. Butcher laughed. It was a wet, hacking sound. He slammed his head back against the cocoon. He told the alien parasite that it had made a mistake. He told it that his mind was not a place for a holiday. It was a sewer of rage and grief. He focused on his hatred. He focused on Becca. He focused on Homelander's smile. He pushed that black tar of hatred into the mental connection the symbiote was trying to form. The alien shrieked in his mind. It had never tasted a human this broken before. It recoiled. But Butcher did not let it go. He bit down on the tendril near his face. He swallowed the black flesh. He reversed the flow. He wasn't being possessed. He was taking the wheel. High above in the ruined Vought Tower, Homelander sat on a throne made of fused bones and obsidian. He watched the fleet descending from the tiers in the sky. The massive bioships were landing in the Hudson River, creating tidal waves that flooded the Jersey Shore. Homelander felt a sense of peace he had never known. For his whole life, he had been the strongest thing in the room, but he was always alone. Now he was part of something infinite. He looked down at his prisoners. Starlight, Huey, Frenchie, and Mother's Milk were kneeling on the floor. They were held in place by gravity manipulation. Homelander had learned quickly. The void gave him control over fundamental forces. Soldier Boy was chained to a machine in the corner. The symbiotes had pierced his skin with diamond-tipped drills. They were draining his radioactive blood. They were using him as a battery to widen the portal. Soldier Boy looked like a husk. His skin was gray. He was barely breathing. Homelander stood up. He walked over to Huey. He tilted Huey's chin up with his boot. He asked Huey if he understood the irony. He said Huey saved Starlight from the weapon only to deliver her to the slaughter. He said mercy was a defect. Huey looked up. His face was bruised. He did not cry. He looked at the window. He saw the streaks of fire in the distance. He knew what they were. The world governments had stopped talking. The Samson option was active. Nuclear ICBMs were inbound. Russia, China, and the US had all fired. They were going to vaporize New York to stop the infection. Huey smiled sadly. He told Homelander it didn't matter. He said they were all dead anyway. He said the rain was coming. Homelander followed his gaze. He used his supervision. He saw the warheads, hundreds of them. He laughed. He raised his hand. He said the atom was a toy for children. He said the void consumes all energy. In the arena, Butcher ripped his arms free. The symbiote on him was not covering him in armor. It was bubbling and boiling. It was trying to escape him. Butcher's will was a toxic sludge that the alien could not handle. He forced the creature to form a blade on his right arm. He cut himself down. He fell into the black lake below. He landed with a splash. The liquid burned, but he didn't care. He waded through the muck. He saw a shape rising from the deep. It was the dragon that had caught him. The beast roared. Butcher roared back. He didn't have powers from V anymore. He had something worse. He had the symbiote cancer. He jumped onto the dragon's snout. He grabbed its neural spine. He jacked his own corrupted symbiote into the dragon's brain. The dragon thrashed. It tried to shake him. Butcher mentally screamed at it. He poured every ounce of his violence into the beast. The dragon's eyes turned from white to blood red. It stopped fighting. It bowed. Butcher climbed onto its back. He didn't look like a knight. He looked like a demon. He kicked the beast. They launched into the air, smashing through the roof of the garden. Inside the tower, the air pressure dropped. The arrival of the Knull fleet was altering the gravity of the planet. Objects started to float. Starlight felt her feet leave the ground. She looked at Soldier Boy. He was twitching. The drain was killing him, but it was also agitating the nuclear core in his chest. Starlight had an idea. It was a terrible idea. She looked at Frenchie. She nodded at Soldier Boy. Frenchie understood. He looked at the machine draining Soldier Boy. It had a release valve. If they could reverse the flow, if they could pump the raw void energy back into Soldier Boy's radioactive heart, it might cause a reaction that not even Knull could control. It was not a bomb. It was a matter-antimatter collision. Frenchie looked at Kimiko. She was conscious, but weak. She was closest to the machine. Frenchie whistled. Kimiko looked at him. He signaled with his eyes. Kimiko tensed her legs. Homelander turned back from the window. He sensed the deception. He looked at Kimiko. He said, "Don't be stupid." He moved to stop her. But suddenly the wall of the tower exploded. The dragon crashed into the room. It was moving so fast it was a blur. It slammed into Homelander and drove him through the back wall out into the open air. Butcher was riding the beast. He was screaming a war cry that sounded like a chainsaw cutting bone. The dragon and Homelander tumbled down toward the streets. Butcher jumped off the dragon in midair. He landed on the balcony. He rolled and came up standing. He was covered in black slime, but his face was visible. He was grinning. He looked at the team. He yelled at them to wake up. He said the cavalry had arrived and it was ugly. Homelander flew back up in seconds. He was furious. He ripped the head off the dragon and threw it at the city. He landed on the balcony. He looked at Butcher. He looked confused. He asked how Butcher was alive. He asked why the darkness didn't eat him. Butcher spat a glob of black phlegm. He said he gave the darkness indigestion. He said he was too rotten to digest. Homelander's eyes glowed purple. He said he would just vaporize him then. He fired his eye beams. Butcher raised his arm. The symbiote formed a shield. The beams hit the shield. It burned. It hurt like hell. But it held. The symbiote on Butcher was feeding on Butcher's adrenaline. It was mutating. It was adapting to the heat. Butcher charged. He didn't fight fair. He threw pocket sand mixed with glass into Homelander's eyes. He kicked him in the groin. He headbutted him. Homelander stumbled. He wasn't used to fighting someone who didn't care about dying. Inside the room, Kimiko lunged for the machine. She ripped the tubes out of the collection tank and jammed them into Soldier Boy's chest port. The black liquid rushed into Soldier Boy's veins. It mixed with the radioactive green blood. Soldier Boy's eyes snapped open. They were not human eyes. They were swirling vortexes of green and black. He screamed. The sound shattered the remaining windows. The energy released was not radiation. It was something new, a cold fire. It blasted outward, knocking Starlight and the others against the walls. The chain holding Soldier Boy melted. He stood up. He was glowing with a sickly light. He looked at the fleet outside. He looked at the sky. He didn't see enemies. He saw targets. He raised his hands. He fired a beam of this new energy into the sky. It hit one of the bioships. The ship didn't explode. It imploded. It folded in on itself and vanished. The void energy reacting with the nuclear isotopes was creating micro-black holes. Homelander felt the power shift. He looked inside. He saw Soldier Boy destroying his fleet. He panicked. The voice of Knull in his head was screaming in anger. Knull demanded order. Homelander shoved Butcher aside. He flew into the room. He tackled Soldier Boy. The two titans crashed through the floor, falling down into the lower levels of the tower. Butcher ran to the hole. He looked down. He saw flashes of green and purple light. The building was shaking apart. He looked at Huey. He grabbed Huey by the shirt. He asked where the nukes were. Huey checked his watch. He said 2 minutes. Butcher nodded. He said that was enough time. He looked at Starlight. He told her to get the team out. He said she could fly. She had to carry them. Starlight said she couldn't carry everyone. Butcher looked at Frenchie and MM. He said then they'd jump. He pointed to the river. He said it was a long drop, but better than a nuke. Starlight grabbed Huey and Kimiko. She hovered out the window. She looked back at Butcher. She asked him what he was going to do. Butcher racked the slide of a shotgun he had picked up from a dead guard. He said he was going to make sure the job was done. He said someone had to keep the bastards busy until the fireworks. Starlight hesitated. She wanted to save him. But she saw the look in his eyes. He wasn't looking for rescue. He was looking for an ending. She turned and flew away. Frenchie and Mother's Milk looked at each other. They ran to the edge. They deployed the emergency base jumping chutes they had packed for the mission. It was a desperate move. They jumped into the smoke. Butcher walked to the hole in the floor. He jumped down. He fell 10 floors and landed on a pile of debris. Homelander and Soldier Boy were brawling in the server room. It was a mess of sparks and blood. Soldier Boy was losing. The void energy was burning him out faster than he could regenerate. Homelander was tearing chunks of flesh off his father. Homelander was screaming that he was the upgrade. He was the perfect being. Butcher whistled. Homelander turned. Butcher stood there. He let the symbiote recede from his face. He lit a cigarette. He asked Homelander if he heard the sound. Homelander stopped. He listened. A low whistle was coming from the sky. It was getting louder. It was the sound of atmospheric re-entry. Homelander's face went pale. He realized the nukes were not hitting the dome. The dome was open. The hole Soldier Boy made. The nukes were coming right down the pipe. Homelander looked at Butcher. He asked if Butcher was insane. He said they would all die. Butcher smiled. He said that was the point. He said he promised Becca he would save the kid. But the kid wasn't here. The kid was safe in a bunker in Mallory's house, so now Butcher was free. He was free to take the scorched earth option. Homelander tried to fly up. He tried to escape, but Soldier Boy grabbed his ankle. Soldier Boy was glowing blindingly bright. He was going critical. He wasn't going to fire a beam. He was going to detonate. He looked at Homelander. He said he was disappointed. He said Homelander was a whining pussy to the end. Butcher ran at them. He didn't run away. He ran at them. He tackled Homelander, adding his weight to Soldier Boy's grip. The symbiote on Butcher lashed out, wrapping around Homelander's wings, pinning them. Homelander thrashed. He lasered Butcher's shoulder. Butcher grunted, but didn't let go. He held on with the strength of a madman. He looked Homelander in the eye. He said, "Scorched earth, cunt." The first nuke hit the tip of the tower. The explosion was silent at first. The light was too bright for sound. The top 50 floors of Vought Tower vaporized instantly. The shockwave slammed downward. It met the expanding sphere of energy from Soldier Boy's detonation. The two forces collided. Nuclear fire meets void antimatter. The result was a cataclysm. The tower didn't just fall. It ceased to exist. The blast wave expanded outward, shattering the rest of the city. The black dome shuddered. The heat was so intense it burned the atmosphere inside the dome. The symbiote matter coating the city screamed as one entity. It was incinerated. Starlight was 3 miles away, flying low over the water when the shockwave hit. It threw her and her passengers into the Hudson. They tumbled underwater, protected only by the density of the water and Starlight's desperate light shield. Above them, the world ended. The heat boiled the surface of the river. The noise was deafening even underwater. In the center of the blast, there was no time for pain. The physical forms of Butcher, Soldier Boy, and Homelander were dismantled atom by atom. The symbiote on Butcher died instantly, its connection to the hive severed by the radiation. Knull's avatar in the sky shrieked as his anchor to this world was obliterated. The portal collapsed. The ships that hadn't landed were cut in half as the gateway closed. The darkness receded, not because it wanted to, but because it was burned away. Hours later, the silence returned. The smoke hung heavy over the crater that used to be Manhattan. The ocean was rushing in to fill the hole where the island had been. The water was steaming. Starlight dragged herself onto the muddy bank of the New Jersey side. She coughed up water. She looked around. Huey was lying next to her alive but unconscious. Kimiko was dragging Frenchie and MM out of the surf. They were all alive. Barely. Starlight sat up. She looked across the river. There was no skyline. There was only a massive column of smoke rising into the stratosphere. The sun was setting, casting a blood-red light on the destruction. She waited for the tears, but they didn't come. She felt hollow. She scanned the debris field with her eyes. She looked for movement. She looked for a flag. She looked for a cape. She saw nothing. The Vought Tower was gone. The 7 were gone. The King in Black was gone. But then she saw something, drifting on a piece of wreckage in the middle of the boiling river. It was a shield, a heavy brass shield. It was scorched and dented, but it was whole. And clinging to the edge of the debris was a hand. Starlight squinted. It wasn't Soldier Boy. It wasn't Homelander. The hand was holding a piece of black cloth, a trench coat. The figure pulled itself up. It was Billy Butcher. He was burned. His skin was raw. He was missing an ear. He was blind in one eye. But he was alive. The symbiote had sacrificed itself to shield him in the final millisecond. It had wrapped him in a cocoon of dense matter that took the brunt of the blast before disintegrating. Butcher lay on the debris, coughing. He looked at the sky. It was blue. A smoky, dirty blue, but it was blue. The black web was gone. He reached into his pocket. His cigarettes were ash. He chuckled. A dry, raspy sound. He looked across the water and saw Starlight. He didn't wave. He just raised a middle finger. It wasn't an insult. It was a salute. It was a signal that the job was done. Starlight let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She lay back in the mud. The world had changed. The age of superheroes was over. The public would never trust a supe again. The government would hunt them down. Vought was ashes. The economy was collapsed. Millions were dead. But the planet was still turning. The invasion was stopped. Not by a hero with a moral code, but by a monster who hated the other monsters more than he loved his own life. Deep in the wreckage of the tower, buried under a mountain of radioactive rubble, something stirred. It was not a man. It was a piece of the void, a small remnant of the black goo. It was weak. It was dying. But it found a host. A rat scurried through the ruins. The slime latched onto it. It didn't try to conquer the world. It just wanted to survive. It scurried into the darkness of the sewers. The king was dead. But the shadow remained. It would always remain. As long as there was light, there would be a dark corner for it to hide. But for now, the light had won. A harsh, radioactive, terrible light. But light nonetheless. The camera of history pulled back from the scene. The crater of New York was a scar on the face of the earth. A reminder that gods are not to be trusted, and that the only thing that can kill a demon is a devil. The timeline had shifted permanently. There would be no return to the status quo. The boys had won, and they had lost everything to do it. This was the cost of a what if. The answer was not a happy ending. The answer was survival. And survival is always ugly. The inquiry into the Manhattan event released its final report 3 years after the blast. The document was 4,000 pages long and redacted so heavily it was mostly black ink. It officially classified the incident as a biological terror attack of extraterrestrial origin. The world had moved on, but it had not forgotten. The site where New York City once stood was now simply called the Crater. It was a massive lake of radioactive seawater, roughly 5 miles wide. The water was a dark, unnatural green. The area was surrounded by a high-tech containment wall, guarded by a joint UN task force. No one was allowed in. The Geiger counters at the perimeter clicked constantly, a reminder of the nuclear fire that had cleansed the infection. The political fallout was absolute. Vought International was dissolved within a month of the event. Its assets were frozen, and its leadership was either dead or in supermax prisons. The Soldier Boy Act was passed by the United Nations, declaring all individuals with Compound 5 in their blood to be biological weapons of mass destruction. There were no more movie deals, no more merchandise. Supes were given a choice to take the cure, a painful chemical process that burned the V out of their system, or face life imprisonment in cryostasis. Most took the cure. The age of heroes was over. It was replaced by the age of fear. In a quiet town in rural Nebraska, Huey Campbell sat on the porch of a small farmhouse. He walked with a limp now, using a cane to get around. His hair was graying at the temples. Annie January sat next to him. She wore a flannel shirt and jeans. Her eyes were still bright, but they no longer glowed. She had taken the cure on the first day it was available. She didn't want the power anymore. She just wanted the silence. Inside the house, Kimiko was teaching a toddler how to use a spoon. She had stayed with them. She never took the cure, but she never used her claws again. She found peace in the simple, repetitive labor of a farm. Frenchie and Mother's milk had drifted away. MM went back to his family trying to repair the years of neglect. Frenchie returned to Marseille, opening a small chemistry shop where he made perfumes instead of poisons. They were the survivors of a war no one truly understood. But there were rumors, whispers in the underground networks, stories of a ghost in the exclusion zone. Smugglers who tried to enter the crater to salvage Vought tech reported seeing a man in a tattered black trench coat. They said he camped in the ruins of the Statue of Liberty. They said he hunted the mutated creatures that still spawned from the radioactive sludge. Billy Butcher did not retire. He did not go home. He had become the warden of the wasteland. He was scarred and half-blind, and the radiation was slowly killing him, but he refused to die. As long as there was one drop of the black slime left in the mud, Butcher would be there to stomp it out. He was the necessary monster, keeping the door to hell shut. The timeline stabilizes here. The anomaly of the symbiote invasion was contained, but at the cost of a major city, and the cultural collapse of the superhero myth. The lesson of this history is stark. When absolute power meets absolute hunger, the only victory lies in scorched earth. The world is safer now, but it is colder. The heroes are gone. Only the men and women remain. And they are tired. The recording ends with the image of a single flower growing through a crack in a piece of fused black glass on the edge of the crater. It is twisted and thorny, but it is alive. Life persists, even after the void